Yeah. Let's jump right in. So I, on purpose, have not refreshed my memory of step one so that I would sort of be learning along with anyone who hasn't done step one before. And I'm excited slash kind of nervous about it. It feels like
You're
starting recovery
so
again.
funny. Nervous. That's hilarious. I never would have guessed that emotion from you. That's
Really? Well, yeah,
yeah.
it does. It feels like going to recovery for the first night. So I'm like, I feel like I'm manifesting those emotions again
Oof.
of
Yeah.
like, I don't
Well,
know anyone. Is it going to be weird?
that's
Um,
true.
but
That
I
first
do.
night is it's always a lot. That first night.
Yes.
It's like, okay, how are we going to mesh? Are people going to be awkward?
What kind of like, can I do pajamas? Is that cool?
All
Oh,
right. Exactly. Yeah. What are people expecting of me? All
right.
the yeah, no, for sure.
So, so let's dive in. Emily is going to teach us through step one. Um, and I'm going to hopefully sort of maybe represent you guys listening because it feels like it's new for me too. So take it away, Emily.
Awesome. Okay. So recovery is a solution to something. And to have a solution, to need a solution, you have to have a problem.
Right.
So step one acquaints us with the problem, right?
Okay.
So the step one is we admitted we were powerless over the effects of our separations from God or from your higher power, that our lives had become unmanageable.
Mm,
So typically, if you're getting into recovery, there's this sense of life being unmanageable, or at least life not measuring up to what you want it to be. And
okay.
you
Yeah.
feel a little overwhelmed, a little helpless, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to fix it.
Hmm.
So what do you remember what brought you in that first time?
Yeah, well, I remember in the pilot last time we talked, I had said that it was sort of from like I had just come through a divorce, so that
Yeah.
and that was still very much lingering in my emotions of my day-to-day life, and it was very much a hard barrier to break through. And then it was kind of what you were saying, that it was a mixture of things of like, and I wasn't sure what to really go in for. I definitely have a tendency to turn to substances when times get tough, or just maybe kind of too much in general. So I was looking back to cut back on that. But it was definitely, yeah, it was a mixture of those two things that I was like, and being told from everyone that I love and respect that I should do it and that it's awesome, and that it's really tough, but you come out changed, and I'm kind of all for that stuff. So I jumped in with 2 feet.
Yeah. You don't, when you hear that, you don't know whether to take that as an I love you or you've got issues. Like, hey, you should think about recovery.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when it's a kind of community like a Christian community, it's kind of
Yes.
both. It's like we're
Yes.
all really messed up and this thing is great. But I could be like,
Yes.
if it's kind of like if it just kind of comes at you out of nowhere, you'd be like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's really funny, I think, about the first couple of weeks, every time I lead a group, there's almost this sense of sometimes convincing people that there is a problem,
Oh
because
yeah.
so much of the time people will come and they'll say, I don't know why I'm in here. I've just, like you, I
Right.
was just told that maybe I should do it.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll just see what happens. It's
Hmm.
kind of the sense I get from people. And
Yeah.
my thought is always, yep, we'll definitely see what's going on in there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so in step one, we're diving into how we are constantly trying to control everything in our lives, either by
Hmm.
over engaging or by under engaging.
Right.
On every level. So, it's funny because we all have this idea of what a controlling person looks like.
Hmm.
They're very manipulative.
They
They
read
try
your
to tell
texts.
yeah. They try to tell you exactly how you should live your life. They
Hmm.
are very judgmental if you don't take their opinions. That's our image of a very controlling person.
Like a boss that you don't like.
Sure, exactly. Or a mother-in-law who's just
Right.
has a
Oh, who's
few
just
too
like on
many,
your back.
yes, a few too many opinions about your parenting, your marriage, your house, and
Hmm.
everything else about you.
Right.
Luckily, I don't really have that problem. I have a fabulous mother-in-law. She has opinions, but we have some good boundaries.
Good.
Good boundaries in place. But so what we're looking at is trying to understand um, what it means that we are constantly trying to look for control
Right.
in our lives in every little thing. So for me, I mentioned in the first episode that I have an anger issue.
Mm,
So anger is one of my toxic coping mechanisms that I use to try to control a situation.
okay.
So my kids will do something that drives me crazy. If I say something very firmly and intensely in a
Mm-hmm.
slightly angry way, I am more guaranteed to get the results that I want because they're intimidated and know there
Mm-hmm.
will be consequences later if I don't obey.
Yes.
Um, with my husband, a lot of times when I react in anger, it's a pushing him away and putting
Mm,
him on the defensive so that I don't feel like I'm being attacked. And maybe he's
mm-hmm.
not even attacking. Maybe it's just he says something that, with my personal issues, I interpret as shaming,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, so often I find myself projecting emotions that onto other people
mm,
that is just me not wanting to look at my emotion.
mhm.
Being like, oh, I'm sure they're mad at me, or I'm sure this and that. And
Ugh.
then it always comes out, well, not always, but most of the time it comes out as, no, like I really wasn't thinking about that at all. And I'm just like, okay, great.
Exactly. I know. I try to always tell myself that people's responses are more about what's going on in their heads and their lives than
Hmm.
about me and how they feel about me. But it's really hard to remember that because we all tend to think that the world revolves around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anger is one way that I try to control things. Getting on my phone so I don't have to think about my life is a way that I try to control things. Losing myself in social media or in Netflix or in shopping or
Mm,
even in researching something. It's all ways that I can avoid or not think about something that feels overwhelming to me.
right.
So we all have this long list of coping mechanisms, that the things that we run to avoid what feels frustrating or overwhelming or defeating in our lives.
I have a friend who, I know a few people who second screen, like if you're watching a movie, you're like also on your phone.
Mhm.
But this friend of mine, she has noise around her constantly. It was like first thing in the morning, there's a go like podcast goes on, and then straight into work with TV going on in the background, like just going through episodes of like Project Runway or something,
Hmm.
or listening to a podcast or something else, like voices everywhere. and I was once like, hey, like this is a lot. Like I don't even have music in my car when I drive a lot of the time. Like this, where's the silence? And she was like, well then I'd have to think my own thoughts. And I was like,
Wow.
and she said it with like obviously with a lot of, she was joking, a lot of jest
Sure.
in there, but it was like
Sure.
also like a kernel of truth. She was
Yeah.
like, well, I can't have silence, and I have to think, then I'm alone with my thoughts. Ew,
Right.
no.
Right.
Yeah.
I really think that we are becoming more and more afraid of our own thoughts and more afraid of just being in our own company.
Oh my gosh.
If
Yeah.
it's not filled with something, a screen or entertainment, something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you never see someone sitting in a restaurant just eating. They're on their phones, they're doing something.
Yes.
So, step one is starting to become more aware of all of these things that we're doing to avoid our emotions, avoid our problems, avoid thinking about the things that are uncomfortable.
Right.
I mean, we live in a day and age when we are all about the comfort. The temperature has to be exact. We have to have food exactly when we want it. If
Right.
it's not microwavable, it's like, really, am I going to make that?
And the
It's
exact dish from wherever in the world we fancy it.
exactly what we want, when we want it, how we want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, all of the normal human problems, conflict in relationship, lack of fulfillment in our work, financial issues, the list goes on of the things that cause us a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't want to think about those things, especially if we feel like we cannot control those things.
Right. Because then the fight, flight, freeze kicks in for the
Exactly.
most part. And I suppose
Exactly.
that's really what procrastinating or numbing out really is, a kind of flight.
Right.
that it's like, I'm going to find a way to not have to process or deal with this stuff
Exactly.
over there,
Exactly.
away from them.
Right. And fight and flight are both forms of control, right? If I'm
Right.
going to fight this, I'm directly trying to control it. If I'm trying to fly, if I'm trying to numb, if I'm trying to do anything other than feel and think what's actually going on in my head and my heart, then I am still trying to control my experience by forcing myself to feel and experience something other than what my heart is begging me to experience. Um, so what we have to do is recognize that this is an issue, that by ignoring our thoughts, ignoring our hearts, we are making the problem worse. It's this cancer, or whatever other symptom that migraines that are constantly ongoing, and you just pop up Excedrin as opposed to like diving into like, why am I having constant migraines? Or,
Right.
Fill in the blank. We get a million symptoms in our bodies, and we
Right.
just want to pop a pill and not experience them, as opposed to, hey, why is my body not functioning the way it should right now?
Right. I should dig into that.
Yes. But whether it's our bodies or our hearts, our minds, or our souls, we're not interested in that. We just want to feel better. We just want to
Right.
feel differently. We just want the issues to go
Immediately,
away.
please.
Yes. And there's a saying in recovery: wherever you go, there you are. AKA, no matter where we run, no matter how we run, our issues are going to follow us. Whether that's in relationships, our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, our problems are still going to be there until we deal with the root of them.
It's amazing. I emigrated and my problems came with me. Isn't that weird?
What? Your problems can jump continents?
I know. Where can't they go? What kind of crazy passport you got to get to be?
Right. Deny them a passport. Seriously.
Please.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I just need to go on a vacation and I'm going to feel all better.
From myself.
Right. And then maybe you'll have a fabulous time, but then you come back to yourself.
Right.
Because that's the problem. We're
Right.
stuck with ourselves. We can try to leave everyone else around us, but you can't leave yourself. Not really, because all of those complicated emotions and everything else follow you. So, a lot of people will wrestle with this idea, though, that we do not have control in our lives, or that we shouldn't try to control our lives. So let's address those separately. So for the people who feel like, well, yeah, I'm totally in control of my life. So there is agency in our lives, and there is supremacy in our lives. Okay. Obviously, we all have choices.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I wake up, I get to choose what I have for breakfast. I decide whether I'm going to take my dog to the park now or later.
That's right.
All these things.
Yeah. What you eat, what you wear, all the things, right? There are a million choices throughout the day, and choice feels like control. But, we may throw on a shirt and choose that shirt and realize, oh, it's got a hole in it. So you could have chosen that shirt, but you don't have control whether or not that shirt's actually the right choice for you. Right. Okay. Or that it's actually going to work for the day because, it totally has this giant hole and now I can't wear it. So you can't control.
Choosing to take a job, you have no idea if it's going to be a good fit, if you're going to enjoy it, if you're going to like the people, but you get the choice of whether or not you're going to take it.
Sure. Yeah, you can choose to go get sushi. You can't choose whether or not you are deeply regretting that choice over the toilet later.
Right. Okay. I'm with you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have choices, but we don't get to choose the outcome. And true control is about being able to select the exact outcome that you want. Okay. And we think we have this all the time. We'll try to escape our loneliness by marrying the wrong person, because we're tired of being lonely. And so we're just trying to control our loneliness by getting married. But then we get into a marriage and we realize, oh, hey, look, our loneliness can even follow us into our marriage.
Right.
Our problems can follow us into our marriage, or, like the job situation or moving, or just fill in the blank.
Yeah.
We think we're controlling our experience through our choices, when in reality, we're just shifting in our lives, hoping for this result that we can't actually control.
Which is the fundamental problem with like living your life in a goal-based way. Because it's saying, purely goal-based, because it's saying, when I get this, I'll be happy. When I achieve this, I'll be happy. If I manage to buy a house in Hawaii, then I'm going to be happy. Or if I manage to get the fastest car I can, then I'm going to be happy. And if you live your life from marker to marker to marker, you find that nothing actually makes you feel better. And I only say this because I have been around now two employees who are multi millionaires, and some of the saddest people I've ever experienced.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And it's not to withhold compassion
Of course not.
from any of us with the things that we desire, whether it is to be married or it is to have a fulfilling job,
Certainly
or
okay to have a goal.
absolutely, in our dreams, all of those things are good things. But if we are hanging our happiness on achieving that, and it feeling the way we want it to feel when we get it, we may end up chasing these dreams our entire lives and forgetting to be happy where we are.
Right.
So point of all of that being, we can't actually be in control of our lives, because despite all of our choices that we get to make, we do not get to select the outcome that we want for any given choice.
Okay. Yeah.
So we do not have supremacy in our own lives. Okay. And then the other idea is, but aren't we supposed to be in control of our lives? Okay. So that's the idea of like, okay, well, for me, I have responsibilities to my husband. I have responsibilities to my children. I have clients. I have my, parents, sisters, friends. I have responsibilities and expectations of me, responsibility to my own body, right? To treat my health a certain way. And, it just feels like the expectations pile up. Aren't I supposed to control and live up to all of these expectations and these standards?
I saw an incredible tweet recently. It was like, it was a big thread that was someone just saying, it started off something very normal that blew up, because it was this guy saying, I don't understand how I'm supposed to eat healthily, work out, work a full-time job, keep my house clean, and listed all the things that we're sort of expected to be able to handle. And a bunch of scientists and people in the know commented underneath about how that was essentially invented by marketing, as most things were that we do without thinking about. And that was that was expected of a two-person nuclear family household, where one person is constantly supporting the other. That's when all those things can get done. And most people don't live like that anymore, but still expect that of themselves.
Yeah.
Which is wild, because you're fighting a losing game if you think you can do all that and be like, I'm batting 100 every week.
And then you throw in parenting into it, and it's like,
oh my goodness, no idea how you do that.
you just don't keep all the balls in the air. Or if you do, I feel like you are the definition of a person who is rigid and must have life a certain way, and there's no flexibility, there's little peace. And so that's a more active fighting for that control, as opposed to the flight, because you have to be maximizing every single second of your day to live like that.
Right.
And even then, most of the time, there's still something missing, right? I still feel like I don't have that joy, that peace, that fulfillment in my life, that happiness that I really want.
Right.
So yes, obviously we do have responsibilities, expectations we need to try to fulfill.
Yes.
Right. But somehow there's this juxtaposition of putting in all the effort that you have peace about, but without being attached to the outcome.
Okay.
So
you both are and are not in control.
Right. You have a responsibility to make good choices, but you do not have the expectation of being in control. Or if people have that expectation, they have unrealistic expectations.
It's starting to sound like an episode of The Good Place.
I know. It's that both and of, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. And maybe that doesn't answer that question fully. I think it gets answered the further you dive into the steps.
Right.
But, so for instance, with parenting, the expectation is to raise good citizens. Well, fantastic. I could do
Perfect.
the
Easy.
best, yeah, right. I could do the best job that I could as a parent, trying to manage all the things and the behavior and all the truths and the responsibilities and the awareness of other people and responsibility to yourself. You try to impart all of that into these tiny humans as teenagers when they think that you're dumb.
Yeah.
But even still, um, have kids go totally off the deep end.
Yeah. Oh my
So
goodness.
did you not fulfill your responsibility, or did you?
Did you fail?
Right. Did you, or did so that's, I mean, and that's the perfect example, because you can put in maximum effort, make
Right.
nearly
All the
entirely,
sacrifices.
yes, the sacrifices, and you try to do all the right things, read all the books and did all the things, and still have children leave the home that are irresponsible, unkind, unaware of other people,
Hmm.
whatever it is, delinquents, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so you fulfilled your responsibility as a parent if you did all of those things, loving them, giving them what they need as best you can. And everyone, of course, will disagree what that looks like.
Of course.
But in the end, you cannot control your children,
Yeah.
right? It's that idea of you can do all the right things and still not get to control an outcome.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have so that's the thing. That's the thing I have to hold as a parent. I have this responsibility to my kids to do as much of this thing right that I can, but I still don't,
Regardless of how it turns out.
regardless of how it turns out. I'm not in control of my kids. So it's a both and that's very uncomfortable.
Yes.
It takes a long time to wrap your brain around, which is why there are 20 questions in the workbook. And then even after that, you wrestle. You
Oh,
wrestle with
sure.
trying to control or feeling like you should control. And I've been teaching the 12 steps for almost 9 years now. And I just went through it again, step 1 the other day, and I was in tears over
Of
the
course.
things that I'm like, okay, yeah, still trying to control there, still trying to control there.
Oh, yeah. You realize that you're just some things you realize that you're white knuckling without even knowing,
Mm-hmm.
without even
Mm-hmm.
realizing that you are trying to control it to the utmost through like most of the things that you're doing, and suddenly, but it hasn't even dawned on you that that's what you're doing.
Right.
And then it hits you and you're like, oh no, oh no. And then having to let go of those things can be really frightening. You've taught a bunch of recovery classes. How heated is the first step ever got?
I think partly it depends on the group. If it's a really
Sure.
big group, people are less likely to be like, no, you're wrong, because I can
Yeah.
do this and this and this, and I have to do this and this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I see people wrestle with step 1 all the way through the steps, all the way through, because what I always tell people is you do not have to master the step before you're ready to move on. You
Right.
only have to accept the possibility even of that step
Mm.
before you move on.
You don't even have to have full faith and sign up and be like, I am on board with this. It's
Right.
just, okay, well, maybe.
Right. Exactly.
But that can be
Yeah.
really uncomfortable for a lot of
It's
people.
super uncomfortable. And the hard thing about this, it's kind of like the whole idea behind love. It's hard to care about something or someone and not be in control.
Mm.
That is vulnerability right
Right.
there. It's hard to care about your job but know that your boss may not like your work.
Hmm.
It's hard to be married or be in love, and the person might decide, well, they don't love you anymore.
Yeah.
you know it's just vulnerable. But just because it's vulnerable and uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not true, and it's not actually the thing that will free you if you can embrace it.
Oof.
Mhm.
It is all coming back to me now. Yeah.
Mhm. All those uncomfortable feelings.
No, just from like kind of sitting in the
Yeah.
room and being kind of coming up to this point and being like, oh, okay, yeah. Here we go.
Mhm.
This is gonna shake things up.
Mhm. And I think I said this in the last episode, but I think that anxiety is coming up against all these things that we desperately want to control
Yeah, because we
and
want to be
realizing that we,
certain.
yeah, and realizing that we can't, you
Yeah.
know, anxiety about this pandemic, how long is this going to go on? What are, what are going to be the long-term effects of this? Anxiety about finances, anxiety, yeah, about relationships, about, what this person thinks of you because they haven't responded in 4 hours. And come on, didn't they have 30 seconds in that 4 hours?
I can see that they've read it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I really, and it's so funny because I think I see all these things on Instagram, even from a therapist, that are like, you are in control of your life. And they're
Oh,
saying that
yes.
because when you say that as a mantra, I'm in control of my life, it's supposed to make us feel better, because anxiety is this, I'm not in control. But the
Yeah.
problem is it's a fake, I believe it is a fake peace. It's a fake calm and reassurance, because, whatever it is that's causing you anxiety, let's say it's finances, again, we can make good decisions with our finances, with our jobs and being responsible and, paying our bills on time, and we could still lose our job in a minute,
Right.
the stocks could plummet,
Right.
tomorrow. And in reality, we are not in control of those things. So I get what all those people are trying to do and trying to make people feel better
The
with that
empowerment.
statement. Yeah, the empowerment. But the problem is that I think it's a false empowerment.
Well, it's half
But
the picture,
yeah,
right? It's
exactly.
without all the context of everything that we just talked about. What would a better mantra be? Like, I'm not in control, and that's okay.
Right, exactly. What do you do with that? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It creates a lot of discomfort. Like, okay,
it would
well,
become a really long mantra.
yeah, yeah. Like, you have to have something to do with all of that discomfort and this. Okay, I have responsibility, but I'm not in control. Like,
Yeah.
how do you, rectify those ideas? But that is step 2 and step
Mm,
3. So step 1 really is about stirring up the discomfort and the frustration, because again, step 1 is presenting the problem. And
right.
if there is no problem, we don't need a solution.
We don't need to be here. We can take our
Right.
Wednesday evenings back.
That's it. And that's it. So, this step is supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be frustrating. And it's interesting because I see all different kinds of responses to the step. We talked about the people that respond forcefully and they feel very
Mhm.
threatened by this idea. But other people actually will get to the step and they'll say, oh, so I don't have to be in control.
Thank goodness.
It's not my job to be in control of all of these things.
Right.
Um, so
Gosh, I
it
would just do such a horrible job if I really was in control.
yeah,
Terrible.
golly. How do we not feel terrible about ourselves if we're actually in control of our lives and things are not fixed?
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
it's such a painful untruth because I think it spreads so much unnecessary shame.
Mm,
Not just like feeling it but being told it all the time through like self-help and podcasts and other things of being like, you're in control, you're the CEO of your own life, and you get to hire and fire whoever you want. So life is bigger than that. Things have consequences.
yeah.
It's interesting. It reminds me of this debate going on around cancel culture. I saw
Mm,
someone say, this isn't cancel culture, it's consequence culture. Like, you don't
mm,
get to, it's interesting how we've morphed language into, um, in a way that really kind of takes the light off the victim in a negative way. Like, instead of
mm,
saying, oh, this man was convicted for sexual assault, we say he got me too'd, as if it just happened to him.
yeah.
And it takes completely away what he did, the context of what he did, the significance of what he did, and it becomes a little like jazzy. Oh, he got me too'd. And so when
Mhm.
people say he got cancelled, and this lady's response was, no, he just faced the consequences of doing something wrong. I think it's a really interesting moment in our culture right now, seeing that debate
Mm,
happen and play out. Of like, if you if something bad happens to you in the public eye as a result of something that you chose to do,
mhm.
is that being cancelled, or is that facing the consequences?
Mm,
This is like
yeah.
it's interesting to me.
Well, and it's such a mixed bag, obviously,
Yeah.
because obviously sometimes it is, you're facing your own consequences of your action. Other times I think it is, we as a society taking the focus off of our individual responsibility and
Oh
putting it
yeah.
onto corporations.
Mm-hmm. Or
If we
famous
could,
people.
yeah, or famous people, right? Somebody who's not me. So if I've heard Pepe Le Pew has been canceled. Somebody said it's because he's very forceful with the kitty because she's trying to communicate she's not a skunk and is
I
not
see.
interested.
Right.
Right. Which I get it. Okay, so the forcefulness, and we don't want to model. Okay, but I don't know. It's the both and.
It's the vitriol as well. It's the level that it gets
Yes,
about
yes,
of just sort of people becoming a public pariah. When it's
right.
things like that, totally I understand. I was specifically thinking about what just happened with, I won't keep this in the podcast because it's not very topical, but I mean it is very topical, it's not very evergreen. What just happened in the UK with Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan, and
Mm,
that whole, very very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, well, but even with those things of yeah, I mean, this obviously applies to a lot of different topics, a lot of different issues in our culture that most of which are very real and very important.
Yeah.
But even with something like the Pepe Le Pew thing, so if that's the real issue, is the way he was, treating this female, okay, that's fine. But like the real focus should be like, okay, how am I seeing the issues in my own life of what for me as a woman, like what am I accepting, which I should not be accepting,
Right.
or me as a mom, like how am I treating or excuse me, parenting my children to require respect of their own bodies
Mm-hmm.
and to be very careful to respect other people's boundaries. Or, obviously for men, where am I expecting things that shouldn't be expecting? And, fill in the blank. But when we put that responsibility on somebody else, we don't have, again, it's this shifting the focus. I don't want to look at what's broken with me. I don't want to look at what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'd much rather talk about what's wrong with, police dog Chase in Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
What
was your response to step one when you first did recovery? Can you remember?
Oh man. Um I think I was okay with it because the entire reason I got into recovery was because there were multiple areas where I had been desperate to experience change for a long time.
Yeah.
And no matter how I strategized, no matter how I planned or accountability or
Yeah.
just all the normal things for change, it just couldn't happen in my life. I was so stuck, and I was starting to believe that maybe change wasn't possible.
Oh, so you had already sort of lived that out so step one for you was like, thank gosh, thank goodness
Yes,
that this is not all down
yes,
to me because I'm not doing so hot with it. I think that was the same for me.
yes, yeah. For me, it was this. Okay, well, that's a relief to hear because but it was also, again, it was also very frustrating because it was like, okay, well, that's fine for you to tell me that I can't control these things, but also, where does the change happen?
What am I supposed to do with this?
Right?
This
Yeah,
feels like you added to my plate.
yeah, it was like, okay, you don't have to convince me of my problem. That's why I'm here. So yeah, but again, that's the purpose of step one. It's supposed to make you realize that without a higher power, there's actually isn't a lot of hope. That's really where it's supposed to leave you.
Which
Without a
is
higher power, there's not a lot of hope.
pretty bleak for a lot of people.
Exactly, which is why I don't love to spend a lot of time in step one. I'm like, let's get on to step two where it feels better.
Well, but
But
before we get into step two, we're going to be joined on our next episode by Kimmy, right?
that's right. Kimmy Short. That's
By
right.
Kimmy Short, who helps to lead recovery through Gateway Church here in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
She is a super powerful speaker with recovery. We know her very well, and her story, I think, is going to be awesome. Whenever she tells it, I'll probably cry. But yeah, so next episode, we're going to be interviewing Kimmy about step one and her story with recovery before we move on to step two. But Emily, thank you so much for taking us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my gift, and I'm very excited to talk to Kimmy next week. She does have a very powerful story, and I love how she interacts with this whole idea about control because she kept trying to convince herself, I'm in control here. I'm in control. I'm in control.
This is me. I'm fine. It's the
Yeah.
I can stop whenever I want situation.
White knuckling.
Oh yeah. For anyone who is literally in the middle of this, is doing step one this week, and is using this as a resource to go alongside that, which is awesome. We're so happy that you're here. Emily, would you have any sort of last thing, like parting words, best piece of advice for someone who is sitting with step one right now?
Mm.
And you can
I
think
mean,
about it.
yeah. Well, for one, I hope that you have a sponsor who can speak into your life,
Mhm.
because no matter how self-aware you are, you need someone to help you see things you can't see for yourself. So, there are a million ways to find sponsors, but yeah, that would be my first piece of advice. Second is make sure you have people that you feel safe that you can be sharing this with. And then three, um, this is the step where I encourage people to just step back and notice.
Mm.
Notice where you might be trying to control things. Notice how you might be trying to control things. Um, Negative emotions are always going to be a trigger. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, sad, angry, frustrated, disappointed, lonely, that's a negative trigger. What are you doing with that negative trigger? Where did you
Mhm.
run? What
Mhm.
did you do? Who did you reach out to?
What have you
How did you?
done?
Yes. And that will tell you what your coping mechanisms that you're using to try to control how you feel in your life.
Mhm.
Just notice.
That's
No
really good.
judgment.
Yeah.
No judgment, because we're all doing it. It's just, what does it look like in your life? What are your coping mechanisms? What are your control mechanisms?
Love it. My piece of advice from what I can remember about step one, if
Yeah.
you're anything like me, which is type A, can be kind of neurotic, likes to get things done, and likes to be like, okay, well, did that, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Chill out, take a breath. This is step one, quite literally.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go sprinting and miss the experience. Just let it take its time, honestly, which is
Mm-hmm.
horrible because I'm impatient, and if you're anything like me, you understand the feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
we're on step one. It's very much a marathon, not a sprint.
That's right.
And be very kind to yourself. Oh my gosh, do nice things for
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
because you're being incredibly brave and stepping into something that is a lot, as you're probably experiencing.
Exactly.
Emily, thank you so much for giving your evening to us, to this podcast. It's
Absolutely.
always a pleasure. And you can check this podcast out at recoverymodepodcast.com and on Instagram. I believe it's at Recovery Podcast.
That's right. Recovery
Recovery
mode.
Mode. At
Recovery
Recovery
mode
Mode Podcast.
podcast.
Didn't quite get that. Let me just do that again.
Yeah.
And you can find us on Instagram at Recovery Mode Podcast. Thanks, Emily.
That's it. Absolutely. See ya.